Hi everyone, this is my run on 9th Lost Chapter, aka the Power of Action Lufenia stage, and this is going to be a no boss turn cheese featuring the combination of Terra, Young, and Noctis. As always, I'll be including a timestamp in the video description that you can use to skip ahead to the section that you are interested in. So starting off here, the starting turn order is quite important, and I would recommend to actually reset until Noctis X first, and the boss's turn order is starting from B and then either A or C, and the reason for that is so that you can warp step targeting boss B in the middle and turn manipulate your party's turn right before the boss with Noctis's LD. So Noctis started first and I used his LD, and this gives everyone in the party free turns to set up their calls and LDs respectively. Before using Noctis's LD on the first turn, I also used his AA, and this is to give myself instant access to the plus version of his skills. Since everyone has 2 turns of warp step, I used the shooting star plus with Noctis right there on his second turn. And then with Terra, it's actually important to at least use Meltdown once because it applies defense down debuff on all enemies in this fight. But thereafter, I just used Meteor with Terra, and then I used the kick with Young, really just to fully utilize the LD warp step buff. So since here everyone has used up the warp step buff and I come back to Noctis's turn, this is where I pop his burst so that I can start using Terra's LD meteor shower sort of spam. With Young, it's also very important to split up the 2 core abilities with Fujin, so I use Fujin's regular call here, and I'm saving the LD call for when the regular call effect runs out. The turn order is pretty flexible inside Noctis's burst. I would of course recommend to try to prioritize shooting star more because it can inflict launch status on all 3 enemies. But the really important thing is to save his LD as the last move inside his burst mode. Therefore that will give him the warp step buff right after he used his burst mode, and it will actually keep the turn count quite low because his burst mode will not take a turn count if he uses his LD last. Alright, so Noctis's burst is ending here, and because he used his LD last, everyone now will have warp step buff once more. So at this point here, I'm still holding off on using Terra's LD because I want to make full use of the warp step buff that everyone has. Do keep in mind though that if you are holding off on using the LD, you want to keep a very close eye on the call, Fujin call on Young, and you cannot let that fall off. So at this point, the Fujin call still has 2 more turns. So I decided to do 1 full turn rotation with all 3 party members, which will bring the Fujin call down to 1 right before I start Terra's LD spam. Okay, so at this point there is still 1 more turn of warp step left on Young and Terra. However, Fujin's call is at his last turn, and I don't want to use the Fujin LD call ability too early. I'm sort of saving it for the later part of the fight. So for that reason, I decided to pop Terra's LD here, and then I start off with the meteor spam right at this point. One useful thing to take note of is that if the ESP dolls, the minions are launchable, you do want to target them with Terra's LD. That's because Terra's LD will do split damage evenly across, and at least that way you get to capitalize on some launch to fill up Young and Noctis' Brave a little bit. But otherwise, other than that, I tend to spam Meteor focusing on the main boss in the middle, and the goal here is to try to bring him to as low as possible, preferably in the red zone, before I run out of Terra's LD and I have to pop the summon. Okay, so at this point here, I could continue using the LD Meteor spam with Terra, but because I have quite a few buffered turns already, and the boss is already at half health, I decided to let one round of turns go off. For number 1, I get to then use Terra's EX to refresh her frame buff on herself. And number 2, at least I get to have Noctis use another charge of his LD on his turn to give everyone the warp step buff again. Noctis still has 2 more turns on his burst effect, so I felt pretty comfortable letting one round of turns go off. At this point though, however, Fujin's call will end on Young, so for that reason I have to use Fujin's LD call on Young to refresh the win enchant on the party. Alright, so everyone now has warp step buff again, and I could have let another round go off to use the warp step buff. However, Noctis' burst effect is at its last turn, and I felt that it's more worth it to have his follow-up attacks to deal damage, and for that reason I decided to just go off with Terra and use up all her remaining LDs here, so that at least I get 12 turns of follow-up damage from Noctis before his burst effect wears off. Okay, so that's the end of the LD meteor spam. At this point the boss is pretty low and I'm about to transition to the support garland unit that I have and the summon mode. I just end up using Terra's EX to end her turn, and that will refresh her EX buff as well before I pop my summon. So at this point here, both Young and Noctis still has 2 more turns of warp step. So I decide to just use up a few more turns. The only thing that you need to be wary of is again the wind enchant that Young has. So it's now on a 6 turn timer, and you want to leave at least a couple of turns left so that Terra will continue to do wind enchanted damage during summon. So I let one more round of turns go off. And then at this point it's at 5 turns. And I was deciding what to do here, but considering that both Noctis and Young still has warp step, I just decided to use Noctis's Shooting Star Plus here. On hindsight, I think it's actually better at this point to just burn his last LD, because Noctis will not be coming back right after this. I'll be swapping him out for Garland, and at least if I use his LD, I get to provide Terra and Young 2 more turns of warp step. So on hindsight, it wasn't optimal play, but it still worked. Okay, so right here I could use Noctis's LD to go another round with Noctis and Young. However, the reason why I did not do that is Fujin's LD call is at the last 4 turns, and I wanted to leave some room for wind enchanted damage during summon. So I just decided to let go of Noctis's last LD charge here and swap him out for Garland support. So I start off with Garland's burst attack so that I get the burst effect here, and this will allow me to enter summon mode with both Fujin's wind enchant as well as Garland's burst effect in play, which will give me significantly higher damage output during summon mode. Alright, at this point the boss is pretty low. It's at its last 6% health, and there's no need to focus on the boss any longer. To complete the fight, you do need to kill off the minions as well. So at this point I'm switching focus to the minions, and I'm just letting splash damage take care of the boss in the middle. With Garland, I use up all his remaining turns spamming LD, because Garland's LD will also cause a 1 turn delay effect on all enemies, and this will give me the turns I need to finish off the minions before they get their first turn. Alright, so looking back at the video here, considering that Young still has 2 more turns of Fujin's Wind Enchant, on hindsight I think I could have gone another round with Noctis using his last LD and get another few more turns of free damage in without taking up the turn count. Potentially that could have further optimized the run and reduced the turn count to lower than 10. So I think by no means this is considered an optimized run, and there's certainly some wiggle room here. Also, the main boss died when the minions still had about 15% health, so in theory if I switched to the minions a little bit earlier, I could have potentially shaved off a few more turns as well. Anyway, that's it for this run. As always, I hope you enjoyed the content and the video. If you did, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next Lufenia fight. Bye bye.